This story has a beginning, much like every other restoration video on YouTube. I was endlessly scrolling Facebook Marketplace, hoping to find that one deal. I didn't actually need a new car, but I knew there was that one car that if it came up for cheap, it wasn't a matter of if, it was just a matter of when. Now, I'd actually owned one of these back in 2019. I'd recently come off a stint of owning an XR6 Turbo and, well, let's just say after that I never ever wanted to own another turbocharged car again. I had bought it for $2,000 and it was as good as a $2,000 turbocharged car could be. An absolute pile of...
Yeah.
Mate, this is some fucking forced camber. Check this shit out. Oh, yeah, that's beautiful, mate.
After a year and a half of owning the Prelude, I would confidently say that it was the best car I'd ever owned. It was cheap, reliable, and sexy as hell.
Oh, let's go up. Oh, let's get down. Oh, let's go up. Up-ups go down.
But one fateful Sunday evening when I was taking some friends home, we crossed Adelaide's most notorious roundabout, the Britannia. And some lady in the Ford Territory just looked at me and said, "Yeah, I really like the look of him. I'm going to give him the old stink eye." In all due fairness, it's a pretty shitty roundabout. I had always avoided it, but thought that because it was dead at night that no one else would be there. In any case, the vehicle was obviously declared a write-off. But what came as an absolute shock to the system was that they paid me a fair bit of coin for it too. Now, just bear in mind that this was peak COVID times where people were asking absolute stupid prices for cars. Because they know what they got, damn it, and they ain't budging. Now, I had the S2 variant, which had the updated front and rear bumper, which, in my opinion, still looks better to this day. Using the funds, I finally decided to be a big boy and buy a V8. Bloody strength, mate. So I decided to get the world's smallest V8, a 1991 Toyota Celsior. I've owned this car since then, and I've loved it. But there'd just been something missing in my life. I didn't know what it was, until it appeared on Facebook Marketplace. That styling, that piercing red, those looks that could kill. It was a 1989, third generation Honda Prelude. Now, the car was advertised as a non-runner. Not confirmed dead, but not confirmed alive either. It was located about 5 hours out of Adelaide, so I thought that maybe this just wasn't in the stars. But the seller proposed a proposition. He'd be able to trail it to me for an extra 200 big boys. So against my better judgment, I sent $200 to some random person on the internet and just hoped that a car would come on the other end. But, true to his word, the next day magically a car appeared. So I got my tools and got to work, trying to figure out what was wrong with it. Now the seller told me he'd actually found it in his shed as part of a deceased estate, and that it hadn't run in about 20 years. Armed with that knowledge, it's safe to assume that the fuel in the tank is bad, and the tank itself is probably pretty rusty. To test, I actually managed to get the car to start, with brake cleaner in the intake. It wasn't much and it wasn't keeping it alive, but at least it confirmed that it was fuel related. So that's where I would focus my efforts. So now it was to inspect the fuel pump and tank. Thankfully, it's actually really easy on these cars, there's a little access in the back. Now I couldn't actually hear the pump prime. I checked the fuse and it was all okay, so I assumed the pump itself had died.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
She was rusted solid, but it was only surface, just a lot of it. Thankfully, there was no big chunky bits or structural holes.
Oh, tangy. I want some juice.
And of course, Facebook Marketplace to the rescue again. I drove 45 minutes to pick up a leftover supply of Aqua Blast rust remover. Because you know, my Saturday nights are pretty damn interesting. So I only have about 3 litres of the stuff, and it's a 60 litre tank, so I had to keep moving the tank every hour. I'd say it was about 99% effective. There was still a couple of little tinges I could see but couldn't get to. But to be honest, with some fresh petrol, I can't see that ever being a problem ever again.
Drinky.
And if not, well, that's just loaded them as problem. With the inside done, I buzzed off all the paint on the outside. There was a little bit of rust, so I converted that as well, and then gave it a couple of coats of black paint, and then topped it with some underbody sealant. And I think she came out pretty good. Now, unfortunately, as I was saying, I lost a bit of footage from the first few days. But fear not, loyal viewer, because with the marvels of modern technology, we can recreate what I did through the power of AI. Mwah. Bellissimo. With the new pump installed, the tank restored, and reinstalled back into the car, I eagerly ran to the ignition and turned the key in hopes that this vehicle would now live. But alas, its new lease on life hasn't been granted yet. But we're all getting closer. Now I'm going to admit this one actually took me a while, but I just assumed the new pump would have fixed it. However, after some time I actually noticed it still wasn't priming. Do we have a wiring issue? I measured the voltage going to the tank, and there was nothing, 0. So I spent the better half of a day just running the wiring back and seeing if I could find a crimp in the line or an earthing issue, but nothing. It had indications that a rat had gone through, but I hadn't seen any chomped wires. I was almost about to give up, because when you've got an electrical gremlin, they're almost always impossible to completely stamp out. But something caught my attention. It was like a little wire that was a bit askew, so I started pulling on it.
FM.
What's that?
You bypass the main relay. Oh, you're kidding me. So once I'd sorted this unholy mess, I installed a new fuse and tried again. And alas, this poor Prelude that hadn't run in 20 years had finally seen the light of day. She wasn't happy about it, but she was back. It was running really poorly, but I could at least now diagnose why. Now, all modern vehicles have what they call an OBD2 port. It allows someone to plug in a unit, read engine codes, and check sensor data. Whilst later gen Preludes would have access to this system, this one doesn't. This has what they call an OBD1. The only way to check engine codes is by looking at a pulsing flash on the ECU. A long pulse indicates 10, a single pulse indicates 1, and you have to count. However, unfortunately, codes don't stack. So even if 10 sensors fail, only one will be reported as the first one. So you have to clear each code as you go along. It's time consuming and painful when you have to buy multiple sensors, but it's the only way to do things. In this case, the ECU was reporting a code 9, which indicates the camshaft position sensor had gone bad. By checking continuity, I was able to determine it indeed died. And thanks to some legend, he shipped the part to me express, no charge. Now I noticed when it tried to idle, it was a bit lumpy or bouncy. So I cleaned out the idler control, because often carbon will cause the valve to stick and it can't idle properly. With a new camshaft position sensor and the idler air control cleaned out, I tried to give it a go again, but unfortunately it ran the same. But it wasn't a total loss because now the ECU had cleared its code 9. It is now showing a code 5. According to the workshop manual, that indicates that the MAF sensor has gone bad. MAP standing for manifold absolute pressure. All it does really is take the manifold's vacuum pressure and converts it into a digital signal that the ECU can read. Now I had just assumed the sensor had gone bad and it was nothing to do with anything else. So I'd gone through the motions of finding a new one that I was about to purchase. But then I decided to actually have a look. And, oh dear. This car is the car that keeps on giving. It's not like the cable just got brittle and fell away. it'd been intentionally bypassed because the other line had been plugged. Now, my only thought is maybe they thought the sensor was bad, so they plugged it up. But the problem is, even if the sensor does go bad, it will send a false reading to the ECU. And the ECU will take that reading. If the reading is outside what the ECU is expecting, it will set the value to a default safe parameter, so the vehicle goes into limp mode until it can be repaired. There is no reason you would do this. So while I was reconnecting the MAF sensor, I decided to change the 20-year-old engine oil, change the spark plugs, and do a compression test on the motor to make sure it was actually healthy.
You've held for so long, but at the end of it all, one day I'll feel fine. So take your time, I'll be here in the meantime. Take your time, all I wanted to do was say goodbye. Caught up inside the just be another voice in the
Sounds a little higher, but good.
Into the mouth. Nice.
So after 20 years of sitting in a shed, neglected, this Prelude had been given a new lease on life. It was now running really well, and an even 150 psi on all cylinders indicates that this motor is quite healthy. Working on this car can't help but remind me of the human experience. I've gone through a lot of emotions whilst working on it. I've already met some amazing people who've shared their knowledge to help me diagnose the car and help find parts, or even just talk about it. People I now call friends. This is a first step on a long journey with no clear end. As always, the journey is just as important as the destination. A journey that I'm excited to document and share with you, if you'd let me.